Welcome to Do You AGRAY, a space where we have real conversation. I'm your host Bassam, and I have with me Kevin, Jermeen, and Suzanne. And it's commonly believed that belief in God is often influenced by emotional factors, while atheism is often considered a result of intellectual reasoning. Could this be true? Could this be opposite? We want to learn from your experience, Suzanne. But at first, I'm going to turn it over to Jermeen to talk about how we met Suzanne and how long we've known her for.
So Suzanne, Bassam has known you through me.
Yeah.
Maybe for a decade now. But I've known you maybe we've met 13 years ago, maybe going into 14 years. And I remember we met when both of us were working at summer camp as counselors.
I remember. Yes. I remember the day I met you, actually.
Yeah. Oh,
we were in the little room underneath.
Okay.
I forget what it's called. They called it something in particular, but it's where we all went to meet and pray.
Ponderosa?
Ponderosa,
Okay.
Yep, that's it. I met you there, and we were praying, I remember.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember the exact moment we met, but what I remember is we were roommates.
Yeah.
And the nights I wasn't head counselor, I would sleep in the lodge in the room because we were roommates. And I just remember every single night I would sleep in the lodge, I open my eyes, and there Suzanne is by the door with her Bible, praying and reading. So that's the memory I have of you since we met. So tell us about your upbringing, your
we want to hear about your background, like what type of family did you grow up in? What did you practice, typically day to day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think there should be a part A and a part B to my upbringing. When my mom was stay-at-home mom, and then when mom went to work. And the reason I want to kind of clarify that this definitive difference was actually because there was a shift in my household spiritually when that happened.
Wow.
And so the first part of my childhood, I would say, it wasn't perfect. I think nobody's is. Both of my parents, to understand my upbringing, you kind of have to understand theirs as well. Both of them grew up in extreme poverty and had a lot of toxicity in those environments. And so they did a phenomenal job growing as much as they could out of that, but obviously without any kind of guidance themselves, you can only go so far and reach a limit. So my upbringing was amazing in so many ways, and then there were things that could have been tweaked, could have been helped a little bit. But we did grow up with a Christian environment, specifically a Seventh-day Adventist environment, and it was mostly great and amazing. But there were
What was it like? Is it did you go to church often?
We went to church every weekend.
Did you have worship at home with the family?
Part A we did. Okay. In the beginning when I was little, we would wake up in for breakfast. My mom would do some kind of devotional. Nice. And we would all just participate, and it was fun. It was cool. But then as she went back to work and she became very tired and very busy, she was a teacher, and so becoming a teacher is now that I'm a teacher, I know it's exhausting. It's very tiring. Yes. It's worth it, and it's a noble practice, a noble position, but it's hard.
It is.
And so she ended up, I think, dropping some things in order to compensate for the lack of energy. And one of those things was our spiritual life in the home, to be honest.
Okay.
And so there was kind of a sense of wandering off and feeling kind of lost spiritually. Pretty much 5th grade when my mom started working.
So she started working when you were in 5th grade?
When I was in 5th grade. And that's actually, unironically, very, very non-coincidentally, when I started to feel lost, to be honest, was 5th grade.
Wow. Lost in what sense?
It's like I had direction before, because I was told... I mean, it's a fragile age to begin with, but... that's usually actually when you start becoming a more intellectual person. And so I started asking questions, started having that why behind everything. And combined with age and combined with the fact that my mother was not a person who liked answering why, and the fact that she also had a lot less time, a lot less energy, there was no one that wanted to answer my questions that I felt safe asking.
What was the typical answer?
You're overthinking it. Or that's not important. It's not practical. Don't worry about it. She was a highly practical woman. Like highly practical lady. Very choleric, very practical, and I was not. I needed the why. I needed the understanding. Yeah.
What were some of those questions?
Well, they started off as kind of silly questions almost, like Adam and Eve. Questions about like, oh, well, who were all the other people? Like, once they left the garden, you know? Like, those are like, good questions. But then eventually it also leaned into, even at a young age, theodicy. Like, God, Mom, how could evil exist and God exist? I was really young when I started asking those questions. And she would literally just tell me things like, oh, you're too young. Don't worry about it. Instead of trying to answer those things for me. And I think...
That didn't seem to, like... phase you as much?
Not as
Maybe
much.
like slowly and gradually?
No. I do remember, though, that...
Because when Jermaine met you, you were still doing your devotional.
I was, absolutely.
And when we met you, you were... And I don't want to jump ahead.
No,
but when I met you, you were... you're studying to become a pastor. And you were an associate children's pastor, I believe?
I was an associate children's family and children's pastor. In LA, actually.
I remember that day we went to listen to her sermon, and it was...
Oh, I remember that sermon.
It was amazing.
Oh, was it? I'm so glad because I was so nervous. And you know what's so interesting? Oh my God, it's so interesting because that sermon ties directly into one of the reasons I became an atheist.
Wow.
Actually, I didn't even think about that until you brought it up. That's
wild.
wild.
I think at that time you were struggling a little.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
You were.
I was struggling a lot at that point. I was questioning whether God even existed. And I was a pastor. Like, holy moly.
And I just remember looking at you. I just remember, I'm like, I look at your sermon, the way you're presenting it, and all your points so clear, so amazing. I'm like...
Thank you.
How can this amazing pastor be struggling?
I remember I think like what you mentioned is when you came down is you said that I'm glad you liked it, but inside it was almost like a turmoil. You were having a turmoil because you felt...
Well, I was preaching the message I needed to hear. Yeah. But I didn't believe it was true yet because I hadn't received it. Because the last thing I want to do is down on my parents. I love them so much, and they brought me up to be an amazing, I think, like an amazingly functional person. Like we're great. And I love them, and I'm very grateful.
They did the best that they knew how to do.
They did the absolute best that they knew how, and so I don't blame them. But there was a deep, deep, deep root of perfectionism in my family, and if it's not perfect, you hide it from the world. And so to the outside world, we looked like this perfect nuclear family. I looked like the perfect little angel Christian girl that I was supposed to be. And she would even say those words, like, you're my perfect little angel girl. You're my... And anything that fell short of that perfection was very... Like, affection would actually be withdrawn from me. And so I learned at a young age, if I am not perfect, I am not lovable. I am not worthy. I am not enough. And so I strived to be perfect. And my sermon... And, like, I had no grace, no concept of grace. But well, not no concept. I guess I preached on it, but I didn't have a concept as to how it applied to me. And neither did my mom or dad, so they couldn't give it to me. You know, whatever you don't fix in yourself, you end up passing it to your kids, right? And I'm a firsthand, like, example of that because neither of them had ever received grace. And so they couldn't show it to me. They didn't know how. And so I ended up preaching on perfection. And that you don't have to be perfect, and that God's grace covers you. And yet I was saying the words, but I didn't believe it because it was just it was in my head, but not in my heart yet. I hadn't experienced it, so it was here, but it hadn't dropped down into me. It was just head knowledge, and all emotions. It was just nothing solid, like experiential yet.
Wow. So, would you say that was around the time you were going through a turning point, or was it before?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and like kind of there's a chronological order of the things that happened that led me to just straight up. And I remember It's so interesting. I remember these core memories of things that I did, prayers that I prayed, moments that I had, aha moments, like when I realized, I put this in quotes now, that God didn't exist. Like those moments, I remember exactly where I was, like, and exactly how I felt and exactly what I said out loud. I was a crazy lady. There were people around me. I was just talking to myself. But so chronologically, what ended up happening is I went to summer camp, and that was such a refreshing experience for me. Like that was so what I needed.
Right after high school?
Right after high school, 2010.
Yeah.
Right after high school, and that's where we met.
Were you planning to be a pastor at that point?
I was still, yes, I was wanting to go into religious studies or theology.
Yeah.
And half of me really meant it, and the other half of me was terrified because I knew on a fundamental level that I didn't get it yet, but I wanted to get it. And so I thought, okay, where else can I go that can teach me what I'm looking for? And I didn't know at the time, but what I was looking for was the grace of God. I just didn't know. I knew I was looking for God and I was looking for love. Grace was not a word that I really understood.
Yeah.
I still perceived God as, oddly enough, just this judgmental checklist of what to do to earn salvation almost. And it was like I had this cognitive dissonance where I was living one way, but I kept hearing these other things. I'm like, what are these things? Like, I have not experienced this grace. Like, what are you talking about? And so in pursuit of trying to find that, I went from high school straight into, okay, well, I'll go to a Christian summer camp. And that was lovely. That was actually, it was very helpful to keep me going. Everything there was, in my opinion,
I'm
as
glad
a Christian
you went
summer
because
camp
that's
should
where
be.
we met.
I love you so much, too. I'm
And
so
we were
glad
just
that
there.
met
We took our kids there.
Yeah, we were
And
just
we had a
there.
blast.
Oh,
I think
Yeah,
you guys
it
were
was
there too.
amazing.
Yeah,
I'm an evangelist for it now.
Yeah.
That's great.
After that,
Oh, I love it.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Wow.
immediately after that, in pursuit of all of my questions that I wanted answered, I ended up going to a Christian school. Obviously, to become a pastor, you have to go to a Christian school.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize at the time, but there is a huge difference between studying God academically and studying God, not even just studying, but just being with God and experiencing Him day to day. I still didn't really understand that there was a fundamental difference in that. I wasn't strong in my own faith in my household. If you disagreed, it meant that you were abandoning the family. And so I hadn't learned in any area of my life how to think for myself. And so then I entered into a space where it was just assumed you already knew how to form opinions. But I wasn't allowed different opinions growing up, so I never grew that muscle. And so I couldn't pick up these heavy ideas,
Was your mom was still around at that time?
She was still around at
What
that
did she
time.
think
It was
of
actually
your-
all the way through... Sorry, go ahead. What did
No,
she
yeah.
think?
What did she think of your questions
I kept
as
my
they
que-
kept increasing? And,
Oh no, I kept those to myself.
Yeah.
I did not
Yeah.
end up
Okay.
talking to my mother about
I
these
see.
things because she couldn't handle it. And you know what? I think there are some people like she had no stability in her childhood, and God provided her this structure and stability, and that she needed, right? And so she needed the law, right? Because it gave her a guideline and a structure. It gave clear, definitive lines that she could follow. And it's what she needed. And I think that's really cool that God can be that for people who need that. I did not need that. That stifled me a lot, to be honest. I needed more grace, the free-flowing, I'm human and I'm able to err and still be loved. But I didn't have that. And neither did she, and I felt so bad. I feel like if she were around, I could have provided that for her, But...
So,
yeah, get me back on track. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, you're good.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So,
Yeah.
in terms of high school, summer camp, going into college,
Yes.
what was your relationship with God like at that time?
I wondered if it existed, actually. I wanted a relationship with God, but in my mind, it wasn't sufficient. What I was doing was not enough, because whatever I did was never enough. To give some context.
That's really interesting to hear because literally what I remember of Suzanne, I don't even remember the moment we met, but literally what I remember is every time I'm not head counselor, every time
there I am with my
She's in the
Bible. I
Word.
was looking for my answers and I just couldn't perceive it.
she was my roommate.
That's awesome.
Every time I'm not
Yeah.
head counselor, every time I wake up, I open my eyes, right there. She's there.
Where
Yeah.
did that desire
Praying
come from?
and,
Was it
and reading the Bible by the door. I felt so
Yeah.
bad. Like, I
was
was
it
not
just
doing that like
Yeah.
her.
like a tradition that you were carrying
No, because
along,
I
or is that
didn't really
something you
see.
enjoyed?
5th grade came along and I rarely saw either. Well, my dad never picked up a Bible, and I came to learn later actually that he was an Adventist and was practically not Christian. He's ethically, what he considers himself, and I agree, he's very good at describing himself, is that he's ethically Christian, but theologically, I don't know. Like, he's just, like, unsure. He wants Jesus to be real, but can't seem to wrap his mind around it. But he does follow Christian ethics as best he can. So, I mean, in that way, he's Christian.
That's common, yeah.
I think it's the fact that he doesn't have the concept of grace,
I see. Wow.
which we're working on. I'm working on it, actually.
Is your dad more like you?
Yeah, he's a lot more like me. So he's
okay.
actually starting to kind of get it. I actually
Oh.
just had a wonderful conversation with him the other day
Nice.
about, like, yeah, we're arguing, but I'm not going to leave you. He thought our relationship was over because we
Uh-huh.
had one little argument.
Yeah.
And that's a very,
Yeah.
that's a concept that comes with not having any grace. And so I have to explain to him, I'm not leaving you because we disagree on something. It's okay. Like, I know that's hard
took
for you.
I
It's
took
okay.
you out of track from
I'm
his
so
question.
sorry. No,
no.
your
So-
question was.
No, you were
I'm
describing like
ignorant.
what was your relationship with God like, and
Yeah. My relationship with God was 100% based on my relationship with my parents. I didn't have a separate concept. They were my connection to God, because remember, I wasn't allowed my own opinions, so my opinions were my mother's opinions. But the thing is, I was fighting the concept, and I feel like I'm talking so poorly about my mother. My mother's amazing. She's a wonderful, a wonderful
Yeah.
human being.
Yeah, we met her. She was
Yeah.
Amazing human being.
Wonderful.
super
mom.
nice.
Yeah, incredible, and literally a woman of God, and in every way she knew how to be. She was amazing. But that
She
being
did her
said-
best. Yeah.
that being
Yeah.
said, though, I definitely, I felt like if I wasn't perfect, God couldn't love me,
yeah,
and I got that unintentionally from my mother, and how she chose to parent me, because she parented me how she wanted to be parented, and that's obviously not always what works for kids if they have a different temperament than their parents. You know, and you know, I'm grateful for the fact that she even like tried so hard. I was a tough child for her.
yeah,
Specifically for her temperament.
So what was your relationship like? What was, well, maybe the belief going into college? Did you go into college with a set major? Like you knew?
Yeah, I did. I
Okay.
went into college with a religious studies major. I took
Okay.
1 year of a break to go to Spain and learn Spanish.
Before college?
In the middle, right in the
In the
middle of
middle,
college.
okay.
So I had a 5-year experience. There was 2 years, and then Spain,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
2.5 years because I kept failing math, but that's okay. Not a
It's
math
math.
person. It's math. I'm not using it. I kept telling them I'm becoming a pastor. Why do I need this? I would
Count how
coach.
many people you baptized.
I know, right? Oh my god. Oh, that's dramatic. No, kidding. But yeah, my relationship with God going through that journey, I was doing it in pursuit of a relationship with God. I didn't feel like I had one yet. I felt like, okay, at the end of this journey, I'll finally figure out how to be close to God.
that He would love you, that you would be perfect enough. Was
Yeah, that I would be, that I would figure it out. Because I didn't really, God felt so silent to me. Actually, I remember a very distinct, I have very core memories.
Yeah.
When I was 5, I climbed a tree and I felt God. And the reason is because I felt free, and the kind of freedom where I made my own choice, I made my own decisions. I decided to climb that tree, and I was going to climb it past the one limb I never climb. And so I like accomplished that new goal and felt that freedom, and I lived on a hill, and I looked out over this like beautiful sunset, and it was amazing. And I remember this feeling of, I am made for greatness, and greatness is made for me. And I was 5. Like, where did I get that from? And I was like I just knew it was God. At 5, I knew God was real and that He was there. And then, you know, post that, you end up falling short at school with my grades. I have a twin sister who was a straight A student and very submissive, the exact replica of my mother. So I always had this golden standard I was falling short of in every area of my life. And so I ended up feeling that I was constantly falling short, but there was no grace to catch me.
Wow.
And so I was just being dragged along, I feel. That's what it felt like. And I kept feeling, okay, studying God in this way will probably help me catch up. I'll finally catch up and I'll get it. And I felt dumb. I wanted to catch up. I felt like everybody else got it and I didn't. And it was really the exact opposite. Nobody knew what they were doing. But everybody thought I had it together.
Yeah.
Right? And I didn't. I was desperately searching for meaning and purpose and worthiness and love.
Did your education, your religious studies, did it help you in that regard? Did it help you direct you in that direction?
No. No. Well,
is this a rhetorical question?
I want to give it some leeway for the people who approach faith from an intellectual perspective. Some people need that perspective. And maybe had I been allowed to, like I said, grow the muscle of thinking for myself and being able to, because I had no concept of boundaries. If someone had an opinion and I said, oh, I don't agree with that, that in my household was the equivalent of I don't love you. And so it was really, I didn't know how to not take an opinion. So suddenly when, like, I just absorbed opinions, like water on clothes. I'm like, oh, that's mine now, like, because I didn't know how to think. So being introduced to an environment where multiple opinions that were completely oppositional to one another came at me. I think most people know what cognitive dissonance is, but for people who don't, I'll describe it. Cognitive dissonance is when you hold two opposing beliefs at the same time and really truly believe both of them. Like a silly example would be believing that the color red is this color and the color red is this color. Like you believe two different things at the exact same time. They do not make sense to believe at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like valuing life and then believing it's okay to murder. You can't do both, right?
Yeah.
So I suddenly, in the habit of absorbing all the beliefs to earn affection and to earn love, I tried to believe all of it all at once because I had no filter and I had no boundaries. And academic environments are not trained to help people like that. They don't. I mean, it's so rare to get to that point in life and literally have no concept of being able to form an opinion.
And I also think
Or maybe it's not
some
so
of
rare.
it is probably trust that you put in these academic professors. I remember one of my friends was saying, well, they have the PhD. They did all the studies. I haven't read the Bible as many times as they have. I haven't.
Yeah.
They
have the degree.
know
They have the
background, they have the
answers.
history.
You know what? That is definitely true. I trusted them to guide me in the right way because I figured, okay, my mom doesn't have the answers I'm looking for. They will have the answers. And I did. I was like, at the end, I was certain at the end of this journey, I'm going to find God.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the journey, I renounced my faith completely and I was atheist.
Oh, wow.
And I was atheist for nearly, well, atheist, agnostic, pagan, back and forth. We'll get there. For nearly a decade. And I was just wandering for quite a while.
Wow.
So what year, hold your
No,
question.
go to that.
I'm glad you
might
guys
be
are asking me
asking
questions. I'm not good at timelines. This is fantastic.
No, you're good.
What year in college did you actually say?
Oh my God, it was only 6 months away from graduating. Not even 6 months. I think it was like 4 or 5 months until I would graduate with my religious studies degree
To become a
and
pastor.
be able to go to seminary school and have the capacity to do that. And I was actually a pastor, not a pastor, an associate pastor for about half a year, I think 7 months in LA. And while I was trying to struggle through this and
That's
go through
when we
this,
heard your wonderful
that's when
sermon.
yeah.
Yes.
And what was your question? Help.
You were a pastor.
What
No,
year?
you
what year?
answered it 4 months before.
I did
I have
answer
a
it.
question
Okay.
after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I did answer it. I was like, wait. Okay.
So
go ahead.
here you are seeking God, looking to these professors and this education system for this answer. So how in the world did you get to the point where you renounce your faith, where you no longer believed in God? What happened?
embarrassingly enough, threw a little bit of a temper tantrum in class because I was so angry. And I was angry because I finally, and I remember the day, I remember the classroom, I remember the people, I remember my class, like, I don't have a good memory. I don't.
But these moments,
Clearly,
you remember.
I don't have a good memory. But these moments were so
Yeah.
core in my development, I remember them, right?
Yeah.
And I remember throwing a little bit of a hissy fit in class. They asked, I refused to do one of the homework assignments, and then when he got to my turn to talk about it, I was so rude. I didn't do it. Like, I was attitude. I'm never Miss Attitude. I don't do that. I was
Wow.
Miss Goody Two-Shoes, Little Miss Perfection, Christian Angel Girl. Like, that's literally what I was going for. And then I was like, I didn't do the homework. I was like, really, like a teenager. And like, it was really uncomfortable for everybody in that room.
Wow.
But then I remember walking out, and no one came after me. No one asked me if I was okay. No one caught on that I was in an existential crisis of the meaning of my life and if God even existed. Like, nobody. And I had all the questions. Like, I asked all the questions, but I mean, it was a theology class. So we were there asking questions, so I'm sure it was hidden. My questions were genuine and desperate. And I walked out that building.
It wasn't just academic, it was
personal to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't just academic, it was personal. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I walked out of that building. Sorry. were you
No,
gonna
you're
say
good.
something?
Yeah.
I walked out of that
Finish.
building, and I remember walking down the steps, and I was in the middle of the steps. There's this building behind me, and there's a sunset, and I remember everything. And I stood there, and all the other students were just like moving around me. I must have looked like a crazy lady because I was just standing there staring at the ground, like, oh my God. And I thought, I can't, not won't or don't, I can't believe in God. I remember thinking that. I can't believe in God. Like, there's no way that a God of love exists when I am in this much pain. Because I questioned my worth. I questioned if I even deserved to have a life, to be alive. Like, not that I wanted to die. It wasn't really suicidal tendency,
Yeah.
but just that I even deserved to be here. I felt so worthless. And I remember, like, there's no way that I can be in this much pain. And I was cognizant that there was more pain experienced in the world. So I even said, there's no way I can be in this much pain and that others can have, so, like, existentially or exponentially larger amounts of pain than me. And then there can be a good God.
Yeah.
Or any God, for that matter. Like, why have I never been answered any of my prayers? Why, like, why all these questions? You know, why can't there be some answer in a dream, some answer in a, like, I remember, and I said out loud, and nobody was around me at that point, but I wouldn't have cared, I didn't notice. I said out loud, I do not believe in God. I am done.
Yeah.
And I remember walking away and just making it through my classes, totally BSing things. I was trying to, like, I had aimed to be an A student, and I was doing pretty good. I got C's, because I didn't care anymore. I was done.
I want to touch on something, and this is, I think a lot of times we hear this from the Christian side, is that, oh, your life must have been miserable. But I've actually heard from a few that no, I felt free. I felt like I'm not burdened anymore. I don't have to live something that I'm not believing.
It took me a week to get to that point, so not very long.
So,
I
okay.
felt so, because I kept expecting a lightning bolt. It's like I said, I didn't believe in God,
Yeah.
but I expected my life to fall apart.
Mm.
And then it just kept going.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, hey, I can form another opinion, and my life is not going to totally fall apart. I can think for myself.
Yeah.
I can feel for myself. Like, for the first time in my life, I actually felt like I had breathed some fresh air and felt like I could. I mean, I was still in agony because it's like, it's like I felt, actually, I realized in hindsight after my mom died that the feeling I had was grieving a death. I felt like God had died. I felt like this being that had been in my life all my life, even though he wasn't really there and I couldn't sense him, like this concept had completely just died. And I was mourning that. And so I was grieving, but I felt this tremendous relief, honestly. And then instead of searching theology and philosophy, because I didn't just study Christian theology, I also was introduced to a bunch of other philosophies.
Philosophy, yeah.
Instead of looking at them in fear, I was actually really excited to
Yeah.
revisit them. I was like, oh my God, I can go back and look at Buddhism. Like, I could be a monk. Like, I was like so excited.
Exactly, yeah.
And then that definitely led down a rabbit hole that did not lead to very good things just because of
Yeah.
how I handled it. And just all these memories, man. But yeah, it was.
Yeah, I remember we'd have
man.
a lot of conversations together, and
Yes.
we tried
Oh
to
my
get
God.
into it, and
Thank
you
you
know,
for loving me.
no, honestly, it never changed because
Yeah.
here's the thing: you were always genuine.
Yes.
You're always like
Very
honest,
honest.
super
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
we really appreciated that, honestly. And,
Yeah.
and we had conversations, and I had made this statement that, you know what, I think you're more Christian than a lot of other Christians.
I remember that.
You remember?
That actually
Yeah.
hung onto my heart for such a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, I pretended to be kind of like, "Yeah, okay. But on the inside, I was like, ooh, thanks. If these guys, these amazing
honestly,
people
it's-
were saying that about me.
I
it was a
really
compliment.
thought that it's
That was true, though.
Yeah.
It was very true.
it's
Thank
not
you.
it's not
Yeah.
it's
Well, you know,
Kindness,
actually, I can
opinion.
tell you why.
Okay.
I can absolutely tell you why. Because one thing, I think it had to have been God in my heart. Because I remember thinking to myself, if I can't find the love that I'm looking for, I will become it. I will be the love to
Wow.
other people that I am so desperately looking for in the world. Now, I did not do it perfectly, and with all the trauma that I did end up experiencing, you know, I was hurtful to a lot of people in a lot of ways, but that's human experience.
we all are,
And,
honestly.
yeah. And in
We
so
all
many, but I continued to try. And there were times instead of praying, I would turn to meditation, and I would meditate on love and being trying to
Yeah.
be loving, and I would meditate on truth and what is true, and that eventually led me back to God. But we can get there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But Suzanne,
Yeah.
tell us, before being an atheist for 10 years, 10 years, you said?
Yeah.
An atheist?
Yeah, I would kind of toggle.
Agnostic, atheist, and
Ag-
Back
pagan.
and forth
Agnostic,
between.
atheist.
I was atheist for actually a very short period of time, and then ended up being more agnostic
Okay.
and exploring the neo-spiritual world that is.
So before all that,
Yeah.
there was one last prayer
Yeah.
that you prayed before this
yeah,
10-year
yeah,
gap.
I did. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So
So
tell us about that.
it actually transitioned from when I was a pastor. My mom got really sick, and
Yeah.
she never, ever, ever saw the doctor. She was one of those I don't need help people. Like, that's why she never got help for anything, right? She never took advice from anybody. And so when my mom said, okay, I got to go see the doctor, and she had been laying in bed crying for 3 days because she had stomach pain.
Wow.
And so she ended up calling us and saying, hey, I'm on my way to the hospital. Or my dad called and said, I'm taking your mom to the hospital. I was like, oh my God, like, is she
Going
okay?
to the
Like,
serious, yeah.
yeah, it was
Must be
really, it
serious.
must be serious. And we knew. And so we didn't even question, like, we just went to the hospital immediately. And I just knew, like, okay, something's up because of how tough my mom was,
Yeah.
right? She was so tough. And then within a few hours, we learned that she had stage 4 liver cancer and that she only had 3 months to live. And at that point, I just stopped. Like, I didn't know what to feel. I almost just... I want to be very raw and very honest. I don't know how to be anything else, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like my emotions just... Everything just halted. And I didn't know what to think or feel. I didn't cry.
Yeah.
I wasn't... Just nothing. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I just totally numb. Nothing.
Yeah.
And obviously, underneath it all was total turmoil. My mom was dying. But I had already renounced my faith at that point, maybe a month before that, not even that long. And so I was grieving the loss of a whole childhood paradigm that I had clung to so desperately. And I let go of that, and I was grieving that. And then my mom was passing away. And so naturally, I turned back to it for a moment, and I'm like, God, if you're there, if you love me, and if you intervene at all, I didn't even pray for my mom to live, actually. I don't know if I told you that. I didn't pray for her to live. I said, please let her pass painlessly. That's all I'm asking.
Wow.
And then it was probably one of the most torturous and painful deaths that a person can have. Morphine didn't work. She was on, like, I almost think the morphine, like, killed her or something. Because she was in so much pain, nothing worked. Her teeth were rotting out. She ended up I'm sorry, I'm getting, never mind. But it was just like, it was gruesome and painful. And I'm like, God, you couldn't do that one thing for me, make it painless. And it was so hard on me. It just solidified, okay, if there's a God of love, he would have answered that prayer.
Yeah.
So he must not exist.
I feel like we should have a theodicy episode.
Maybe.
We can.
So, and for me, it's interesting because it actually I ended up not even being angry at God, because I truly came to the genuine opinion that a God of love doesn't exist, because that wouldn't happen if there was a God of love.
Which, if that's the case, makes sense from your view.
Yeah, and it gave me a sense of peace for a while, because I arrived. You're crying more than I am. I've cried it all out though. So, but yeah, no, I arrived at a sense of peace and being like, okay, yep, there's no God, and now I know where to go from here.
Yeah.
And so it kind of gave me this solid foundation to stand on, but I still clung to the idea of I want to be love. Like, it's not out there in the world. I don't care if God of love doesn't exist. I'll be love.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know where I got that from, except it was
And that's
call
what
of
we
the Holy
felt.
Spirit,
Honestly, knowing
Yes.
you, that's what we felt. We felt like you were just so honest, so genuine, so loving.
So loving, so kind.
Yeah, so kind.
I always tried.
And we thought this is the description of Christ-like person.
Christ-like person.
Honestly.
Yay! Makes me so happy to hear that.
I told you one time that, like, you're probably one of the first ones going to heaven.
I'll be skipping in there. Come on, guys.
Not from like a religious point of view where you have to
Yeah.
accomplish a checklist, but you actually were living it. And that's
Yeah.
what we thought. In your utmost level of atheism or agnosticism. So that's what we thought. And I'm going to just share a short story. One day we were having a discussion, and I'm just trying to talk to Suzanne about, but what about this and what about that? And so I was
going anywhere.
I wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, I was like, can we back this up a little bit, and can we start with something super basic, super simple? Is the fact that me and you are sitting here right now conversing to each other. Guess what? She's like, no.
She told
There is a philosophy. there is a philosophy or a philosopher that says that we are actually here. We're not really here. And so at that point I was like, you know what?
I have nothing.
We love you. I love you. We'll
Get you over.
Done.
There's nothing else needs to be said.
Do you remember that?
I do. I didn't remember until right now, but I do remember that. I was fighting it so hard.
No,
I was fighting
honestly, like it was.
Well, it was too
a little bit
painful.
enjoyable to honestly
I could tell
to
you
get
liked
that perspective, because I didn't take the religious studies and I didn't get that much into philosophy. I would hear them on and off here and there, but whoever's sharing them has an answer or a return.
God.
But I know Jermaine also went through the same program.
Yeah,
we
we
went
did.
through very similar, like, crises regarding our faith. Only you landed on the other side of the fence, maybe a little faintly, but you did. Like I leaped off one end, and you were just like,
The questions were the same, though. I think the questions absolutely were the same. I remember
I
when
always
first
admired how you clung to your faith in spite of all your doubt and fears. Like, that's hard.
But
That's really
I've gone
hard.
through the same
Yeah.
questioning time and prayed.
And
It just didn't take that long.
took a year break.
I had to take a year
You went to
break,
Kenya
I
for a
went to
mission
Kenya.
trip for a whole year.
I remember that. Yeah.
That was
And,
helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I think that would have helped me too. I should have gone with you.
there is a part that I've been looking forward to talk about, but I think we're gonna excite everybody and leave it for part 2.
Yeah.
And that's when you started having the supernatural experiences.
Oh my God! Yes.
Yeah.
And so stay tuned with us.
exactly.
Part 2. We're gonna get into that. Some gnarly stories. I don't even think they were dreams. They might have been.
I believe they were dreams at the time, but in hindsight, I think I still try to rationalize it. And I think everyone does when they have those kind of experiences, but it was too coincidental to be just dreams. Honestly.
Yes. So
part two is from atheist to back to
Christian.
Back to Christian. Yeah.
And so thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
I'm glad
Stay
I could
tuned
be here.
for part 2.
yeah. Stay tuned.